on the sidelines?
Well, Alex, first off, I would say that the word that Netanyahu cancel the exercises is very suspect. I would say that that's a cover story. Nobody wants to embarrass the Israelis, even though we do embarrass them by canceling these exercises. But I'm 99% sure that it was the White House canceled them, and they're allowing the Israelis to say, oh, no, Netanyahu canceled them.
Is that because they got intel that the Iranians were going to open up on the ships? Because the Iranians said, you've got one warning, don't come back through here.
Yeah. Well, you know, the strait is not all that wide, the port that's navigable. The Iranians can, in fact, do that. I don't think the Iranian government would do that deliberately, but as I say, it's so dicey, so iffy, and so susceptible of provocation or accident there that any sober-minded general or president would try to do something. Now, what I think was key here was the assassination of that young scientist. Apparently, he was a chemical scientist.
Deputy head of that enrichment program.
Right, yeah. Now, that was clearly a Mossad operation. Everyone pretty much concedes that now. And, you know, not only was that pretty heinous, I mean, have you seen the pictures of the scientist's family? And,
yes.
You know, I mean, and then the head of the spokesman of the Israeli Defense Forces says, well, I'm not going to shed a tear over it, you know? And the bluster and the kind of arrogance that was displayed there suggests to me that that was very, very really a unilateral Israeli operation. They have all that capability. They don't need the CIA to help them on those kinds of things. And so they not only did it, but they bragged about it. It was the fifth one, and they didn't so much as tell Hillary Clinton or anybody else they were going to do it. Right at this very dicey time, okay? It looked very much to everyone who...
And so that angered the power structure that they weren't consulted on the escalation.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, when things are so labil, as the Germans would say, they're so dicey in the Straits and the Persian Gulf, you don't want people to do this on their own hook, okay? And have the U.S. Automatically blamed for it together with the Israelis. So it was then that something very curious happened, Alex, and this is kind of interesting.
Well, stay there, Ray. We're going to come right back. Tell us about this on the other side.
Okay.
And you know, where all of this is going. And again, folks, we're not endorsing the mullahs and the Iranians. We are not endorsing what could cause World War III and $7 or more a gallon gas. We're trying to have cooler heads prevail here. And that's why most of the Israeli power structure doesn't want a war as well. The question is, why do others want it? Okay, we are back. Ray McGovern, retired former top CIA analyst, joins us. Writes, of course, for Consortium News. We also post it at Infowars.com. Finish your point about the Israelis not checking with the United States, and you think that's what changed this. And then I want to go back to, I am seeing more hawkish rhetoric suddenly from the Iranians, and I didn't normally see that in the past. And I wanted to ask you why we're seeing some of those statements in your view, Ray.
Okay. Yeah, what I was starting to say was a new development that has been around for a long time, but just had not been released or surfaced. It has to do with the Israelis going around recruiting people in Iran and other places like that, posing as CIA officers. It's kind of a false flag recruitment. It's done all the time, but it's usually done either with the permission of, or at least the tacit admission that this happens when you use an ally's name. What the Israelis were doing was trying to recruit terrorists, acknowledged to be terrorists. This Jundola is one group there in Iran, and they were posing as CIA case officers. Now that's been known for years within the CIA, and all of a sudden this week it surfaces. All right, and it surfaces in such a way as to say, the CIA professionals are really, really ticked off at this. There is a certain honor among thieves, if I can put it that way. There is a certain regime that you don't do this to a close ally's intelligence service. And the Israelis are doing it doing it all the time, and especially with respect to Iran, to assassinate folks and stuff like that. Now, what I want to pick up on is your earlier question just before we went to break, Alex, where you said, well, why would anybody want a war? Okay? Now, let me be clear here. Everybody's thinking that the nuclear weapon issue is the biggie. It's not. Let me say it. Let me be clear, as the president would say. All right? The Israelis and the United States are not primarily motivated by fear of a nuclear weapon in Iran's hands. Okay? The Secretary of Defense, Sunday before last, asked himself rhetorically, are the Iranians working on a nuclear weapon? No. That's a direct quote, okay? They aren't. So why all this falderall? Well, it's an election year. The top Israeli leaders think they can mousetrap the U.S. into doing something that they almost succeeded in getting Bush and Cheney to do. There's very little risk for them to do that, they think, okay? And they can do what the primary objective is, regime change, okay? It reminds me of how Paul Wolfowitz and those neocons used WMD in Iraq. Anybody remember that? Okay? Wolfowitz finally admitted, when they were riding high after they got into Baghdad, he finally admitted, well, WMD, it was just something that we could all agree on bureaucratically, and so we use that as the reason, okay? Wasn't the real reason. So the analogy is apt. A nuclear weapon development on the part of Iran is not the real reason. The real reason is regime change, and our leaders are joined at the hip with the Likud government in Tel Aviv. That's what they want. They see an opportunity to do it, and so they're trying to do it. Now, the best way for them to do it, of course, is to provoke things. Now, let me just pick up on, so McGovern, you say that they're not worried about a nuclear weapon. I say definitively, no, they're not. Now, what's my proof?
Well, Pakistan has over 100.
Yeah, but the proof is that when, in 2003, the Iranians came to us and they said, look, we're prepared to negotiate everything, even our nuclear development program. We know that we're entitled to develop nuclear energy for energy, but we'll negotiate the whole thing. John Bolton, who was at the State Department at that point, turned them down, said, and go somewhere, okay? Then what happens? Well, a couple of years later, the Iranians are running low on the 20% enriched fuel that they need to power their medical nuclear reactor, okay? And so there's a sort of a juncture there where they need to refine this to 20%. All they can do now is just for the energy, for the electrical energy, I think it's less than 5%. So what did they do? Well, a proposal is made by the United States government and by the Europeans and, by anybody who wants to put the Iranians in a bad light. And they say, all right, look, give us 2/3 of your low-enriched uranium, and we'll have it processed out in Russia or France or Turkey, and we'll get.
Tell you what, Ray, we got to go to break. This was a short segment. We're going to come back with about 5 more minutes with you. Finish that point, recap it. Then I want to ask you, why are so many experts saying don't have a war? I want you to break down what could happen in this war straight ahead with Ray McGovern. That's right, attempting to get our constitutional republic back from the big 6 megabank special interest that have overthrown our republic. And are trying to now institute their police state. But it's one thing to pass laws saying that they can secretly arrest citizens and have us disappear into a black hole and use the military against us. It's another thing to actually implement it. And before Ray leaves us here in a few minutes, I did want to raise that point to him, something I haven't talked to him about in the last few months that we've interviewed him. But Ray, getting back to your point about the Iranians before Ahmadinejad came along, they were ready to deal. They had inspectors everywhere. They're like, here, we'll give you our uranium. You can make sure it's non-weapons grade. We're having to import most of our gasoline. We need power. We're ready to do whatever. We want to come in out of the dark like Libya did. And you see how Libya got treated. You see what happened to Mubarak. I mean, the point is that we all know what happened, but for those that don't know, finish up what happened there, Ray.
Well, not many people know this, Alex. That's why I would like to just mention what happened. When people say, well, McGovern, how do you know that the Israelis really aren't interested and really not afraid of this nuclear program? And why is the U.S., in lockstep with them? Well, the proof is in the pudding. Low-enriched uranium, which is all that Iran has right now, needs to be refined to a much higher degree, 90%, to make it suitable for a nuclear weapon. Now, still, that's the material. That's what they use, okay? Now, on October 1st, 2009, the Iranians shocked everyone. You know what they said? They said that they would agree to send as much as 75% of its low-enriched uranium abroad to be turned into fuel for this medical reactor that I talked about before. Now, the New York Times, which is always have a very Zionist bent, even the Times acknowledged, it said, quote, if this happens, this would represent a major accomplishment for the West, reducing Iran's ability to make a nuclear weapon quickly. So they worked it out in Geneva here, and they were going back to Vienna to do the detail work, okay? Now, what happens a day before they're going back to Vienna? Well, Vienna was to happen on October 19th, 2009. On October 18th, this terrorist organization, for whom the Israelis recruited folks with the pretext that they were U.S. case officers, they detonated a car bomb at a meeting of top Iranian Revolutionary Guard commanders and killed 5 of them, 5 brigadier generals, okay? Now, what do you suppose the military and the Revolutionary Guards did? They went to the supreme leader, who was their patron, and said, "You're going to negotiate with these guys? You're gonna trust them to send out 3/4 of your low-enriched? Come on, give me a break." And so that was the next day. They didn't send their top negotiator. They sent a lower-level guy. They still wanted to do a deal, but the strength of the opposition in Iran to dealing with folks like this spiked the deal, and the U.S. wasn't interested in it either. Now, fast forward a year, and you have the Brazilians and the Turks, the Prime Minister of Turkey and the President of Brazil working out an agreement, this time not for 3/4 of their low-enriched uranium, but for half of it to be shipped out of the country, out of their control, and refined for their medical reactor. Guess what happens? When they agree on this, within hours, Hillary Clinton gets up at the White House and she says, this is our answer. This is her words. This is our answer to that. We're going to go to more and more sanctions. We're going to cripple the economy of Iran.
So Iran is on record. Everything you said is on record, but never talked about on the news. It's a footnote. They have done nothing but try to actually follow the orders of the quote international community, but the system wants war with Iran. So that leads us to, we only got a few minutes left here with you, Ray. I know you've got to go. We know that the politicians want war as a political distraction, at least some of them, with all the domestic things that are happening. But why are so many top generals and the former head of the Mossad and others saying, don't do it?
Well, because it would be suicide. Now, the results, the effects of all this, not only on the world economy, but on various places like Gaza and Lebanon, where people could be put into action to shoot rockets at Israel and that kind of stuff, the effects would be terrible. But the worst effect, and the reason that the head of Mossad